Good evening and welcome to Beyond the Bar, Nutrition, Hydration, and Body Image. This is part of our Dance Injury Prevention webinar series, Break It Down with the Experts. So tonight we're going to discuss eating habits that promote health and performance goals, as well as some of the consequences that might be seen when this doesn't occur. So we have two wonderful speakers tonight. We have HSS sports medicine physician, Dr. Marci Goolsby, and HSS sports nutritionist, Heidi Skolnik. And they are both members of our Women's Sports Medicine Center here at HSS. So welcome, and we're happy to have everyone here. And I will get started with kind of a general question for you both. What is your overall philosophy around nutrition and just overall wellness?
I think that recognizing how much food does for us, in that it can be celebratory and enjoyable and pleasurable and functional and delicious and nutritious and fuels us. So really sort of recognizing all the roles that food, nutrition, and eating can offer us and embracing all of that. And then of course for dancers to really recognize, again, the sports nutrition model for the artistic athlete, so that they're approaching food like we do with other athletes, which is at times strategic, and not from a place of restriction, but from a place of making sure we're getting enough to be able to do the things that you want to do, to be able to shine on stage and focus in class.
And I'll add to that. Thank you for having us, by the way. I think Heidi said a word that I often use in my practice, which is fuel. I think it's important as athletes for you to think of your body as a machine, as a race car, and how you need to put the best fuel in. You need to put enough fuel in to kind of keep the machine running. But there's also other things that are really important for performing your best. And outside of just the nutrition piece and balancing that with your exercise, but also things like sleep and stress management and taking care of yourself otherwise, kind of that self-care and wellness that's really important to help you manage and perform at your best.
All right, wonderful. So I think that's a great place to start for what we're going to talk about tonight. So what are some of the challenges that dancers might face when they're really trying to reach their nutrition goals and, eat to fuel their performance?
Well, obviously it's multifaceted, but I'll start with just the schedule. Dancers are busy people, and so it's figuring out, how do I make sure that I'm getting in what my body needs, given whether you're still going to school, so you have school demands, and you might have other demands on your schedule aside from taking classes and performances. And so really kind of that idea of, aside from the knowledge of what to eat, it's a time management issue to get enough in. And notoriously dancers tend to underfuel during the week, and then on the weekends sort of have to make up for that, depending of course on performance times and what might be going on in their life. But I think there's that, and then there's a lot of misinformation out there, so figuring out what it is they really need, getting in some of those micronutrients. Dancers are at higher risk for iron deficiency, for not getting in enough calcium, especially depending on their age, making sure they're getting in enough to build that peak bone mass. And I think Dr. Goolsby will talk about some of the ramifications of what happens when they don't. So I think overarching, it's pretty simplistic, but then, nutrient timing, how to eat around performance or around class, how to make sure they're getting in what they need to stay fueled and strong.
As an athlete, it takes some planning ahead. There needs to be a plan in place if you're going to be out all day from the apartment or the house, and what do you need to take with you to make sure that you have the snacks at the times that you need them, and what kind of foods are the most efficient for you to eat that are going to sit well with you, but give you good energy for for the sport or the rehearsal or practice that you need to be ready for.
Okay, got it. So Heidi, as well, just to go off into that for a second, can you go into a little bit more about the micronutrients and just maybe a few main nutrients that would be good for any athlete, but especially dancers?
Well, as we let me start that over. I think it's challenged because we eat food and we don't think about eating nutrients, but clearly getting in calcium, whether that is from dairy, which is a very rich source of calcium, it is possible, but takes more planning and effort to get it in from non-dairy sources, calcium from non-dairy sources. You know, you need about 1,300 milligrams when you're 18 and below, about 1,000 when you're above 18. And it's important because by the age of 19, you have developed 90% of your bone density for life. And in your 20s, you finish that off. So that's your peak bone mass in your 20s that you will use to carry you through all of your activities for the rest of your life. And yet we know that many teenagers are dieting or following food fads, which may eliminate whole food groups. And so that can be have lifelong consequences. So calcium for sure. Iron is another one because we need extra iron as we're growing, and then you're being athletic. And then depending again upon whether you're getting in enough food and the variety of food that you're getting. So iron is another nutrient in particular that dancers need to pay attention to getting enough of.
Okay, wonderful. So before I ask this next question, I'm actually going to put up another poll just to see what you guys know about this topic. So that'll pop up on your screen there, and we'll get into that. So Dr. Goolsby, so what are some of the consequences that a dancer might see when there's not a good balance between their exercise and their nutrition?
So there's different phrases that are out there, different terminology for the issue when there's an imbalance between the nutrition and the exercise. You might have heard the term low energy availability, and that's essentially describing that your energy out and your energy in, like your nutrition and your exercise, are imbalanced, and so the energy available to you is low. There's also energy deficit or energy deficiency, describing the same exact thing. The term that was initially described in the early 1990s is the female athlete triad, and that's specifically referencing that low energy availability and the consequences that it has on the menstrual cycle and on bone health. So when there is an imbalance there, the whole hormone system in your body gets suppressed. And when that happens in females, that's often manifested as either getting a change in your periods, like it becomes lighter, or goes away completely. And it looks like most of you guys are on point there with the answer to the question that we put up. It's not normal to miss a period as a dancer. That doesn't mean it's not common. It can be common, unfortunately, but to say, oh, that's normal, don't worry about that, because there's a reason that happens. And usually it's that imbalance between the nutrition and the exercise. Sometimes there's other medical explanations for somebody not getting their period, from everything to being pregnant to having polycystic ovarian syndrome. And there can be an overlap with other issues with that as well. But typically, a lot of what we see, Heidi and I see, that imbalance. And so going back to the female athlete triad, you've got the consequences on the menstrual cycle. And of course, if somebody's on a birth control pill, you lose that tool in your toolbox to evaluate someone's menstrual cycle. And then the third component is the bone health. So somebody being at higher risk of getting early osteoporosis, as Heidi mentioned, we reach our max genetic potential in our late teen, early 20s. And so we have our lifetime risk of getting osteoporosis is increased if there's something negative that's happening to the bones during that late adolescence and early adulthood time in particular. But also in my practice, I'll see increased risk of stress fractures. So had quite a few today actually who came in with having stress fractures and trying to identify the reasons they had that. The other term that you may have seen is relative energy deficiency in sport, or RED-S. And that's describing the same phenomenon, the same basic principle that there's an imbalance between the nutrition and the exercise. And when that happens, the impact on other things beyond just the components of the female athlete triad have been described in that model. This isn't unique to females either. And so relative energy deficiency in sport is a more generic term describing it in females and males. But male has the male athlete triad, which is the same idea. There's a suppression of the hormone system in the males and increases their risk of getting stress fractures and bone health related issues. But there can be other consequences as well, such as an impact on someone's fertility. Not something you're probably thinking about necessarily at 15 or 16, but the longer something goes on, like that suppression of the hormone system, the harder it is for that to recover, and the harder it is for you to have children later on when you're ready for that.
So, Marci, let's just describe that for those listening. Primary amenorrhea is when you haven't gotten your period by age 15. So if you're 15 and you haven't even gotten it yet, you might be thinking, well, I just didn't get it yet. But by that age, it is worth going to a doctor for an evaluation to see if your hormones are suppressed. So again, recognizing we have a basic physiology that we have to fuel our organs, right? Our heart, our lungs, our kidneys, all of that, just to live. Like, even if we weren't a dancer or active, you have to fuel your physiology. And when you're under fueling, what happens, that low energy availability is you have enough energy to dance. So you think, well, how can I be in low energy? I'm dancing, but that energy has to come from somewhere. So the energy is being compartmentalized to the most immediate, which is movement. But now you have low energy left for all your other physiology. And your body goes, I'm going to disrupt your hormonal system. We're not going to do that now. I'm going to slow down your digestion. We're going to, slow down your heart rate. Right. So all of these things are going on. You can't see them because you're still moving. You might not even feel like you have low energy, although you might. It can affect your brain. You can feel foggy and kind of get irritable or depressed. There's lots of other symptomology. But if you're 15 and you haven't gotten your period, it's worth getting checked out. Or if you've gotten your period and it has stopped for 3 months in a row, you're hurting your bone health. And it starts immediately. You're hurting your bone health. And the longer it goes on, the more severe. And it takes a while to get your period to refuel, to get to give all of your whole system enough energy to get your estrogen or other hormones flowing again, and to begin to correct that imbalance and start fueling growth and repair for your bones, because that takes energy. For your bones to build takes energy. So when you're in low energy state, you don't have enough energy to build your bones.
And a couple comments about the periods is, everybody's age at which they start is usually genetically driven. So if your parent didn't start till they were 16, your sister didn't start till 16. Well, 16 may be a normal age for your family, but again, it's worth evaluating and considering what these other issues might be that are adding to it. The other thing is, in the first year of after starting your period, that it's normal for that to be a little wonky and for it to not be every month. It sometimes takes a year or so for that to pick up, but it's important to recognize patterns. So if it seems like it's fairly regular and then it drops off as your intensity at dance increases or your nutrition, there may be some deficiencies, you've kind of cut some things out and you lose your period, that's a sign that your body's like, we're not getting enough here. We're not getting enough to function normally. And it's important to have that evaluated.
Okay. Yeah, it's great to know, the signs when you should seek help, go to a doctor, and that's great to know. So going off of that, Heidi, what would be a healthy pattern of eating for a dancer? And what should they aim for?
So to this point, a lot of times this low energy availability can be inadvertent. In other words, again, you're just so busy, you wake up late, you grab a granola bar, you don't really like what is served for lunch, so you don't have something, or you have a little bit of a yogurt, then you're rushing to get to your class. And so it may just be that you're busy, or it may be more purposeful, like you're trying to lose weight and you're on a diet and you're skipping meals, or you're following some kind of funky diet plan that tells you to eliminate groups. The best pattern, and it's a pattern of eating, is where you are eating regular meals and you use snacks to bridge the hunger gap or to help prepare you for class or recover from class. And that you're distributing the calories that you're entitled to throughout the day in sort of even chunks. It doesn't have to be perfect, right? There's no reason for perfection when it comes to food. Our bodies are really good and adaptable, but we do want to sort of try to have an evenly distributed. So by 2/3 of the day, you've eaten 2/3 of your calories. It's not like you save it all up and then you eat at night. And in fact, I think that I see a lot of dancers who do underfuel, and then at night they're really hungry and they kind of feel like they're out of control, or they're restricting because they're hungry, or they do then eat more at night, and then it's hard to go to sleep, and then they wake up and they're not hungry, and that cycle starts again. So you want to move the food sort of down earlier in the day so that you can eat dinner and feel satisfied. Another pattern is that dancers tend to, again, they might undereat during the week and then on the weekends try to catch up, and that can just be uncomfortable, and it's not providing their bodies with the energy and nourishment they need to meet the demands of each day.
That's, good guidelines to follow. I think we all have struggled with, not eating in the right amounts during the day. So that's great to know. So what are some concerns about hydration in dancers? What's preventing them from being fully hydrated?
I think that very specific to dancers is that idea of a few things, like Marci just sipped, that idea of sipping throughout the day versus, if you wait and you think, oh, I don't want to drink a lot right before class because it's going to slosh in my stomach. Or I don't want to drink a lot because I don't want to have to take off my leotards, right? And it's like, oh, that's like, so you may not be taking in the hydration you need, and then you have a hard class and you're sweating and tired, and then after class you try to down a lot at once, and then you pee a lot. So because our body actually gets the signal, we just got a lot, right? We can get rid of some. But what the best way to do it is, in fact, opposite of all that, is that if you are sipping throughout the day, your body will sort of take that in. You won't have a lot in your stomach at once. When you drink a lot, it's like a funnel. There's not so much that can get through, and so it kind of sits there. So if you drink with your meals, because your body absorbs fluid better when your stomach's not empty, and you drink with your meals and then you sip in between, you won't have a lot and you won't have to pee a lot all at once. You'll be able to sort of retain it. And that's a much better strategy. And then remember that your meals actually provide about 1/4 of your hydration needs. So again, not skipping meals. One, when you're having your meal, you're drinking, and then 2, it's also providing fluid for your body.
So before this next question, I'm just gonna make a plug for the Q&A. If anybody has questions on anything we're discussing, please put it in that Q&A button on the bottom of your screen there. And I'm gonna put up one last poll just for fun before we start this. All right, so that pops up on your screen there. And I know you've talked about dieting here and there throughout this discussion, but what are your general thoughts on dieting?
Well, I encourage dancers to figure out how to eat to maintain their weight and to be well nourished, as opposed to diet to do those very things, right? It's a different mindset. It's a different approach to eating. One is freeing. One seeks food versus restricts food. One allows you to be more, now, we hear intuitive eating a lot, and it's a great practice, but it's not always practical. It doesn't work all the time as as athletes, because sometimes you have to, again, anticipate your schedule, know that, school ends at 3, you have to do your homework because you're taking class at night or you have class in the afternoon. Again, you have to anticipate your schedule and eat accordingly. So I might know that I need to have a snack because I have to be prepared for this class, or I need to eat dinner a little bit early. I might need to have dinner number 1 and dinner number 2. I might have to kind of split that up because I have class, at 6 o'clock at night. So intuitive eating doesn't always work, or you incorporate it along with a plan. But the real idea is that dieting itself is very damaging and can really lead us down to a place that we are more dissociated from our own feelings of hunger and fullness, of the foods that we enjoy bring us satisfaction and work best for our body. And in fact, going on a diet and body dissatisfaction are two predictors. Doesn't mean it always happens, but they are two precursors to developing disordered eating and eating disorders.
Yeah, I think, when I'm speaking with patients, I try to talk about what they're eating or what their nutrition is. I kind of try to avoid using the term diet because it does have that connotation of trying to lose weight. And unfortunately, I think there's a lot of missed messages. I mean, it seems like you're constantly getting bombarded a lot of times with how to lose weight, diets. And the truth is it shouldn't be a diet. It should be a lifestyle change if somebody needs to lose weight, for example. And unfortunately, there's a lot of people making a lot of money off of things like diet and weight loss. And I think it just sends the wrong messages, particularly to our dancers. Again, I like to use terminology that's more positive, like fueling your body for your sport and fueling your body as an athlete, as opposed to being nitpicky or specific about, what you can and can't eat. Heidi and I are in full agreement that we fully support eating anything and everything. Like, there is no bad food. We don't particularly like the term clean eating. Maybe I'm speaking for just myself, but what does that mean for people? What does clean eating mean? Like, what the rest of us are eating dirty? So, just having a good balanced diet, there is nothing wrong. In fact, I think it's one of the best things to eat is just like a big giant bowl of ice cream. Sometimes it has a lot of fuel source. It has the dairy in it. It's got a good calcium source. So there are no things that should ever be on the do not eat list for dancers. Obviously, there has to be a good balance. You're not going to be able to perform and sustain on eating a bag of Doritos every day and only eating a bag of Doritos, but it's also okay to eat a bag of Doritos every now and then. And so I think that's really important messaging, is just there should be no foods that are on the do not eat list.
And to echo what Marci's saying, I think it's important because we are bombarded with messages from a very early age. Girls in particular, but boys too in their own way, and it may be perhaps sometimes different way, although it's all becoming, mixed, about body and weight loss, and mixed messages about, indulge, relax, have this chocolate at night to get away from your problems. And on the other hand, don't eat this, don't eat that, moralizing around food, right? Clean eating, have a cheat day, all of these really loaded words. And I do talk to my dancers a lot. In fact, I just did today. I had a talk this afternoon with really trying to recognize how normalized being like this moral message around food. Like, we are not good or bad based on what we eat. So I'm so bad, I just had a cookie. I'm not bad because I had a cookie. It's a piece of, like, it's a food. I felt like eating a cookie, or I'm so good, I had carrots. And it may be that, like, I'd like to have carrots because they're sweet and crunchy, and if I put them with some hummus or with the yogurt dip, they're really satisfying and they're a great snack. But sometimes I just feel like having a chocolate chip cookie, and then that's okay too, right? And so getting away from moralizing our food choices, because we internalize how language, and although it seems like just semantics, I think semantics matter. So, right, that idea of eating clean implies that somehow when I don't eat that way, I'm dirty. And the only time food's dirty is if you drop it on the floor, like, and this idea of, again, I'm good or bad, or I cheated. I mean, that's such a loaded word. Who are you cheating? I mean, to me, I would feel cheated if I never could eat a piece of chocolate. That would make me feel cheated. I'm not cheating on anything. Who made those rules? And so they're very loaded, and I think it's important because it ends up normalizing that we should feel badly about food choices. And I think this is really important, although I know it's a little nuanced. Food is not healthy or unhealthy, right? We're healthy. And so food is more or less nutrition. So to Marci's point, I might want to eat some Doritos. Sometimes I'm going to eat a few. Sometimes I might eat a bag or whatever. But obviously I'm not sustaining myself on Doritos. I wouldn't feel good and it wouldn't work for the long term. But if I eat a food that has less nutrition, I now don't become unhealthy. Right? So if my basic patterns of eating are regular meals and regular snacks, and now I eat a cookie or an ice cream or Doritos or anything, I now am not unhealthy because I ate a food with less nutrition. And people are so fearful, and they go, that's healthy. That's a healthy food. That's an unhealthy food. And it just doesn't work like that. And in fact, what we do see are people who try to eat so perfectly, they become unhealthy. And to, again, what Marci said to start, obviously, I believe in nutrition. It's what I do, right? It's my world. But it is only one vertical of many things. And I think when we take the focus actually away from how we look and onto function, so what is my strength? What is my grace? What is my agility? What is, am I sleeping well? What is my mental health? What are the strategies that I use to get my head clear so I could walk into an audition and be present and shine, versus anxious and nervous and self-doubt, when I have healthy, good, strong relationships and people in my life who are propping me up. All of that contributes to how we do. And it doesn't come down to one thing. It's many things. There's a big burden on nutrition, that idea of perfection. And you cannot get your diet perfect. That's just not how it works. It doesn't need to.
All right.
Amen.
Thank you.
That was great. If there's a
little
dancer,
bit of a rant, was that?
No, it was perfect. If there's a dancer that might be struggling with body image, which this is a topic in and of itself, but is there anything that you might recommend for them to start, having more of a positive mindset, maybe stop comparing to others in the class, or is there a way that they can kind of change their mindset about that or start to?
They should, that if there's concerns about that, they should meet with a psychologist, is kind of my short answer. And there's lots of psychologists with different experiences, some more with the eating disorder component, they'll really understand that body image. There's also a lot of sports psychologists and people that have some combination of the two of those that can be very valuable people. I feel like we should all have all be in therapy, to be honest. I think it's incredibly valuable. But that would be something where somebody to talk through and help you understand those things. I think it's also important that that we create a culture of positivity in the studio, and at home. Making sure that the people who are around you and around your children, are creating the right messages too, and how they communicate to it. Again, I'm using the example of, I have a daughter, so I'm using an example of my daughter, that the messages that they're hearing and that they're experiencing are positive when it comes to body image. There's so much of us that it's normal and it's not normal or okay to talk badly about your body image in front of young people. And I think we just need to stop doing that and create a culture of positivity when it comes to body image. And I think there'll be a trickle down effect. If somebody is already having an issue, again, I think, it depends on the severity of it, but communicating in a positive way about the things that we do feel, like Heidi was talking about, focusing on how do you feel? Are you performing? That is what's important. Not fitting into a particular mold. And that's really important too, is that there's so much variability genetically of where we should be in terms of our weight and our body type. That's so impactful. When somebody tries to sort of change that, I think that's where people get into trouble.
And I also think that, body image is a tricky thing. It starts when we're young and how it's formed. And so I don't know that we really even know the impact and how to change body image, but we can change how we behave based on how we see ourselves. So body image has to do with it's how we feel in our body, how we perceive our body to be, how we think other people perceive our body to be. It's kind of complicated, really. And certainly if you're really struggling, if it consumes a lot of your thoughts and it drives a lot of your behavior, you want to reach out for help. On a more simplistic level, because we can't, is we don't all feel good every day about our bodies. Our feelings change, and feelings aren't fact, but they are real. And so if I'm having a bad body image day, I don't feel good in my body today, what do I do with that? Now, for some people, they might choose not to eat. And others might say, how do I choose, even on a day I don't like my body, how can I still care for my body? Which means giving it food, movement that feels good, maybe a great shower, I don't know, a hug.
Right.
It's like good sleep. So, and then this idea of body positivity, there's actually layers to that. So body positivity, I think, has been misunderstood to say, oh, I love my body and I have the best body and my body is great. But body positivity, think of like somebody you really love in your life, right? It doesn't mean you think they're perfect. It means you recognize them for who they are and you love them and you love them. So I can, when I say I love my body, which I think people are reluctant to even say, right? It's really acknowledging. So you could be body positive, meaning I'm just positive that I'm happy. I can see what my body can do. I feel fortunate I have this body that can move and dance and take me through life. Body neutrality is I don't really even need to think about my body. Like I'm just neutral. I don't make judgments about my body. Like how mean to judge, right? Why would you have more self-compassion? So body neutrality. And then there's a third, which I'm blanking on, and I talk about this all the time, so I don't know why I'm blanking. Body positivity, body neutrality, body acceptance, which is just sort of like, this is my body, my genetics, and I don't have to judge it. I'm just going to accept. So there's sort of different nuances in how you can approach it. But I agree with Marci too, that the negative body talk, this fat, I'm so fat. No, you're so fat. No, I mean, I'm so fat. You're not fat. I'm fat. And we do this, we commiserate with each other, but it's damaging when you participate. It's damaging when you hear it. And again, it normalizes that we are supposed to not like our body and be critical of our body. And so you also said before, don't, compare and despair. It doesn't help to compare. Dancers are in front of mirrors all day, and mirrors are there to help you correct, right? To be feedback in what your form is and how to make corrections. It's not there to be critical of what we look like. And yet often it becomes distracting in that way. And so I do think there are things that we can do and act on along the way in terms of helping us with our body acceptance and our behaviors as it relates to how we think about our body, and begin to change our self-dialogue. But that's, again, a little simplistic for someone who's really struggling, and 100%, talking to somebody can really help change that.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you. Also, I'm not sure if we confirmed the poll question from before. I wanted to know the answer. Which has more protein, which kind of milk, just so everyone knows.
So that is a tricky one, only in that the cow's milk and soy milk are close, are neck to neck. I'm going to still go with cow's milk, but it might only be a gram different, like 8 grams versus 7 grams. Also, we don't call it pea milk because, as you can understand, that doesn't sound very attractive. But there's new brands out there of pea protein milk that also is pretty high. But oat milk only has about 3 grams versus cow's milk at 8 grams, and good response almond has 1 gram of protein. And the reason I think this is a good question is I think sometimes it's very popular. Again, like I think almond's milk was the craze, so I'm glad to see so many people know. And it's not a good substitution. It's fine to use if you're making like a shake and you want some liquid, and you want to put in some protein powder with it, or using yogurt and that just is a liquid, but it's not a good substitution for cow's milk. And or soy milk is a pretty good substitution. It's pretty nutrient rich. And so if you want to be plant-based, that's the one. But I think there's a lot of messages coming out, and then we adopt it and we don't even know the effect it may have on our health and well-being.
And to kind of close out, what are some signs that you would benefit from seeing a provider about your nutrition if you think you might be struggling with your nutrition?
Well, we covered a lot of this already, some of the signs of having an eating disorder or disordered eating. So I'm going to spin this a little bit to more if you're observing somebody else that you're concerned about. There can be a lot of things. Obviously, the visible one might be weight loss. So if you notice kind of rapid weight loss, and also sometimes it's just the attention to the food. So sometimes people who have anorexia, for example, might do kind of very specific regimented things with the food on their plate. You may hear some of the language that we just talked about like foods that are like off limits, they can't have. And sometimes that's in the form of a particular nutrition approach. So somebody who becomes vegetarian or vegan, gluten-free, dairy-free, what I'll sometimes call the gateway diets, gateway drugs. And sometimes that's the start, like having something that they have to control they can't have. And then that can often spiral into other things. But a lot of times eating disorders are not visible, and particularly in the beginning. There are other forms of eating disorder besides restrictive types. So the anorexia is the one that can sometimes be more obvious with weight loss. But there's a lot of binging and purging, like self-induced emesis, which is making yourself throw up. And that wouldn't be something that you would necessarily see as a visible sign. So somebody who's frequently going to the bathroom right after eating, there's some visible signs on exam, but that's pretty unusual for us to see, things like calluses on the knuckles. But if you had a friend or a colleague or a relative that you heard throwing up in the bathroom, for example, after eating, well, that might be an obvious one, but sometimes it's much more subtle than that. And how to approach them if you're a friend or a colleague can be difficult and obviously nuanced depending on your relationship with the person and your concerns. And it may be directly asking that person if they need help or if anything's going on. And sometimes it's also alerting somebody else in their life, like alerting a coach or a teacher or a parent that there's something you saw that you were concerned about. The ones that often present in my office is things like fatigue, iron deficiency, and then obviously loss of periods and bone stress injuries, but it can also be traumatic fractures too. So somebody who's rolling their ankle and breaking their foot in a dance class, that might be an opportunity for me to ask some of these questions about their nutrition and any disordered eating signs. But it's certainly, one of the things that we talked about in the beginning was it's really important to try to identify these situations early, if possible, and make sure that somebody's getting the help that they need, because if it goes on for an extended amount of time, it can really have some lifelong impacts on the bone health, for example. So trying to get help early on, it's usually a team. It might be a physician, it might be a dietitian, a psychologist, and there may be others involved on that team. And it's important to just make sure that somebody's getting the help they need.
And I'd add to that, I think you're right on that. We've talked a lot sort of about that eating disorder versus disordered eating. Disordered eating, which, by the way, it's all on like a spectrum, right? And some people even don't use the term disordered eating anymore. It's more sort of dysfunctional eating. I don't know what term is less intimidating. It kind of like doesn't matter. The real issue is, how anxious are you around your food? How much does food take up your brain space? Right? And so if it is a source of anxiety for you, you don't have to wait till you have a full-blown eating disorder, right? People suffer at much more sort of manageable levels of eating and functioning, where it's still disruptive in their life and it still consumes their thoughts and behaviors and actions, and it's reactive. And so I think that you can reach out to talk with a sports dietitian or with a therapist. You can go to a doctor if you still are getting your period and you don't have any injuries. It doesn't always show up in blood work, although fatigue and also, let's also be clear, you can have iron deficiency and not have an eating disorder, disordered eating, right? You can have, you can certainly that's a very common thing. In fact, if you're getting your period, you're at a higher risk for iron deficiency because you lose iron in your blood every month. So I don't want people to think if you go to a doctor, then we automatically think you have an eating disorder. That's not the case at all.
Thank you, Heidi, for clarifying. Yeah, I mean, certainly, but if somebody is not getting enough nutrition overall, they're going to be deficient in some of those micronutrients as well. So yes, good point. It doesn't go both ways necessarily. But.
Yeah, and so so I think that it's great to have a team as you're coming up in the world to check in with. And I do get the effort and expenses there if you don't feel a need, versus like if we're at school and you have somebody available through your school system, that like if you're in college and on a dance team or taking classes and there's a sports dietitian on campus, it's way easier to check in that way. And I encourage it. Like I say to the students at Juilliard in the School of American Ballet, you're here for 4 years, take advantage. It's for free while you're here, even if you have a single question. But I guess I just encourage everyone, you don't think that you're not sick enough in order to reach out for help, because the sooner you do, I want you to make peace with food and body and be able to reach your own potential at whatever level it is, whether you're taking dance because you just love it and it feels good, or whether it's your aspiration to do this as a career. You want to feel good and fueled and nourished.
Definitely. So I know we've gone through a lot in this. I don't want to put you guys on the spot, but do you have any last words that you'd want them to take away from this webinar about nutrition or body image or hydration or any of that?
I mean, I think that the take home message is, fuel your body like it's a machine. Take care of yourself overall, not just as it relates to nutrition, but good sleep, stress management, have a good support system, have strategies for handling stress and anxiety, because they will be there, and seek help when you need it.
Ditto what Dr. Goolsby said. I mean, I really think, self-compassion. It starts with self-compassion. I think in the dance world, there is a perfectionistic, because you are always refining. Part of being a good dancer is practice, refining, and looking at subtle, and so that sort of plays into this whole view of everything in your life has to be that way. So I think being a little bit more self-compassionate toward growth and toward getting help when you need it, and looking at food as a positive thing in life that can fuel your machine, but also you're a person. So you are both. There's a duality. Food can also be enjoyment, and that's good too.
All right, great. Thank you both so much. I think that's pretty much what we have time for today.